Good day. I'm Mr. Leomar Christian G. Nielo, and I'll be your teacher in your subject Introduction to Communication Media. Today we're going to discuss the chapter 1, which is Living in a World Media. So let's get started. Let's have first the fundamentals of communication. In this lesson, the objectives are we have to determine or you should be familiar with the meaning and importance of the concept of communication, the various definitions of communication, the elements and nature and purpose of communication, its function, and its various types and the various models of communication. So basically communication as a is a universal phenomenon. Okay, we all know that it is impossible not to communicate. We had to communicate in order to live, in order to be understood. We have to transmit information, ideas, emotion, skills, knowledge using symbols, word, gestures, and visuals, and so on. As communication being a universal phenomenon that defines all human behavior, it is important to have a clear understanding of the concepts of communication. Basically, we have to know what is communication, why is it important to human beings, how does it work, what are the elements involved in the process of communication and how do they relate to each other, and what are the different types of communication. First and foremost, let's have the meaning of communication. It came from the Latin word communis, which means common. Uh, Based on the other linguistic roots of the communist, it can be related as well on the communalism, commonality, communism, community, and communion. Okay, so as the very term describes, the ultimate aim of the communication process is to create commonness between communicator and receiver of the message. Okay, so aside from the definition that I gave to you a while ago, let's have the definitions coming from different authors, researchers, and communication scholar. Okay, so let's have mention at least three from this out of 10 definitions of communication. According to Colin Cherry, transmission of stimuli is a communication. Okay, communication is a social interaction through messages by Grabner, and lastly by Joseph DeVito. Communication refers to the act by one or more persons of sending and receiving messages distorted by noise within a context with some effect and with some opportunity for feedback. Okay, those are the definitions of communication. Now let's have the importance of communication. We all know that communication is important because every day we have to speak, we have to relay message to be understood. It's part of our day-to-day living. Basically, all beings that led community life and form relationship is because of communication. Okay, it's like a food, it's like a shelter, it's like a dignity, it's an essential need that we have to acquire or we have to do every day. Okay, compared to animals which have low level symbols for communication, we humans have a very unique capacity to use language. Okay, so actually, at the same time, communication provides us personal enjoyment. Just try to think of it that, for example, you're in an isolation, or you don't have any chance of communication to a friend, to a relative. It's like really a punishment. It's like you're in a prison. Like just that is the reason why. Uh, that's the reason why prison is like that. It's like you're being isolated. It's like because it's really a punishment not to talk to anyone. Okay, so when you're communicating, aside from it helps us to interact with our surroundings, with our friends, uh, with our relatives, it does create a positive relationship. It gives us the sense of love, of friendship, and willingness to depend with each other to enjoy life. Okay, now uh, communication has a lot of fruits, and one of those fruits is media. Okay, so basically, why don't you try to imagine a world without media? The basic mission of mass media is to create ties in human society, share news. Just try to imagine you don't have TV, you don't have radio, you don't have newspapers. Where are you gonna get your information? How can you be updated? Because since then, since the time immemorial, during the 90s, 1800s, we have a mass media. We have newspaper at least. Okay, so in the modern world, media plays its role in a big manner. Okay, in terms of the political system, from the public opinion, the public demands, and it sets the agenda of our social life. Okay, so basically, no social activity, whether it's marketing, business, education, politics, media profession is possible without communication. Okay, or what this means is media profession is not likely to happen without communication. Okay, so let's have the functions of communication. Uh, Communication, as I've said a while ago, it plays a major role in our lives because in terms of education, information, cultural promotion, in terms of entertainment, stimulation, it has a role. Okay, I won't be reading everything in this slide, but I want to emphasize that communication in all aspects of our lives, it plays a major part. Okay, so it's really a significant matter that we should try to understand, not just because you're a communication student, but at the same time because you're a person who uses communication in his or every day of his or her lives. Okay, so moving forward, let's proceed to the elements of communication. This is very basic. I believe you have encountered these elements since you were in high school or maybe in elementary. Okay, we have sender, we have message, we have channel, receiver, noise, feedback, context, and effect. So those are the elements of communication. So let's start first the sender. Basically, a sender, just like what we're doing whenever we use cell phone to send something, we are the sender. Okay, but on mass media, the sender there is whenever we watch TV, whenever we listen to radio, the, the sender there is the news reporter. Okay, it's the source of the message. It's the source of the news story. Okay, for example, in a musical performance, the sender there is the singer because he or she is the one accountable to relay the message of the song to the audience. Okay, so basically, sender plays a critical component in communication. Okay, and at the same time, as a sender, our social background, our personality, education influences a lot on the quality of the message that we try to give. Okay, so we have sender has three functions: to decide what is being communicated, to encode, put the idea in such the manner that the receiver will going to understand, and transmit the message to the receiver. Now, for the message, as we all know, it is the thing that we're trying to say. Okay, whether it's verbal or non-verbal. Uh, Verbal message, it can be written or oral message. Basically, they're composed of words. Okay, for example, a news report or a lecture by a teacher, like what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to relay a message. On the other hand, we also have the nonverbal message, and it can be seen on your behavior, on your movements, on actions, on your clothes, on the style of your conversation, and the pitch of your sound, of your voice. It relays a certain message to your receiver. So you have to be mindful with your actions as well, not just the thing that you're saying. Okay, so moving forward, let's have the channel. Channel, it's the medium that we use or that a sender uses to transmit a message to the receiver. Okay, so basically we have five senses such as hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, and seeing. These are basic natural elements, channels of human communication. Okay, but I want you to understand that uh, communication can be classified on the basis of five basic natural channels. So, for example, we have the tactile communication. We use our touch or taste, olfactory, which we use our smell, the audio, our sound waves, our ears, and the visual communication using our eyes. Now, for example, we use any technically developed medium, like for example, television, newspaper, books. Those are kind of mediums. Okay. Uh, and then at the same time, uh, similarly, sender uses one or more channels to maximize the communication effect. For example, uh, I'm your teacher. For example, I'm teaching in a classroom. Just try to imagine. Okay, I'm teaching in a classroom. For example, I'm using a projector. At the same time, I'm writing some important notes on our blackboard. At the same time, the way I communicate with you, I'm using a gestures. Okay, while I'm providing my lecture simultaneously all at the time. So basically, I'm not just using one medium, but at the same time, there's a lot of medium that I'm using. Okay, so that's a channel. Now, receiver. For the receiver, we all know it's the one who's going to receive the message from the word itself. Okay, it has a role, it has two roles, to receive the message and to decode the message. Now, decoding, it means the process of extracting a message from a code and interprets it. For example, I gave you a certain message and you receive it on your cell phone, or I give you an instruction. Not not right away, you're going, not in just for example a second, you're going to understand what I am trying to instruct to you. It takes I think 2 seconds, 3 seconds to really understand what I'm instructing to you. Okay, so that is the process of decoding. So uh, you have to at the same time to keep on your mind that to respond to the message through feedback. Receivers may be audience watching movies, listening to music, hearing a lecture, getting an email from your computer. Uh, Communication fails or remains faulty when message is rejected or misinterpreted by the receiver. For example, what I'm trying to say is that when decoding fails, uh, the communication fails. Okay, when you don't understand what's the person trying to teach you. For example, you can't understand what I'm trying to say. Hindi nyo maintindihan. Basically, our communication process is not successful. Okay. Next, feedback. Feedback is, for example, I have given you an instruction, and then you said yes to me, and you managed to do my task that I've given to you. Then that's the feedback. Meaning, our communication process successful because you responded and at the same time you did what I asked you to do. Okay? So for example, when you're singing and you receive a clap from your classmates, that's a feedback. Okay? Uh, at the same time, we have this so-called self-feedback. It's like, for example, when you talk to somebody and then, for example, you were really annoyed or really angry that time and you accidentally shouted to your classmate, and then after that incident, after that communication process, uh, when you go back to, for example, you go back to your house and then you reevaluate what happened, and then you realize you should have toned down your voice or your pitch. That is an example of self feedback. Okay, now another feedback you can imagine is, for example, when you're asking someone and that person look puzzled or look confused, it means that's a feedback. It means uh, he did not understand what you're trying to say. Okay, next, uh, we have to keep in mind that feedback is not always positive. It can be negative as well. It can be immediate or delayed. Okay? So when you feel a boredom on the person that you're giving a speech, that you're trying to give a speech, it means it could be considered as negative. Okay. And then, for example, you receive the answer of your letter on the unexpected time. It can be delayed. Okay. So moving forward, let's have the noise. Noise is a kind of communication barrier. It's anything that distorts the message. Uh, for example, we're talking, I'm giving you an explanation, and then there's a tricycle driver who passes by, and then what happened is that you wasn't able to understand what I'm trying to say because the noise of the tricycle was for you to understand what I'm trying to say. So basically, that's a kind of distortion that that actually prohibits the message, or that provides a communication barrier to a message for you to understand. Okay, there's a lot of noise, a classification. So we have psychological noise. It's due to the psychological reasons. For example, an audience couldn't appreciate or understand your talk because she doesn't feel good. So that is a psychological noise. Okay. At the same time, a semantic noise is language-related problems in communication. For example, I have a poor grammar, or I gave a highfalutin words which you couldn't understand. Okay, that's a semantic noise. Okay, at the same time, we have the contextual noise, which a communication took place in an appropriate time or place. One example here is that, for example, you give a positive or wishing compliments in a funeral, which is not good. I mean, you should be sad. You should be you should shouldn't be celebrating during funeral. Okay, you should be giving compliments during funeral because you're supposed to be uh you're supposed to be with with the family of the of the person who had those funeral. So you should be it's an appropriate place basically. That's an example of contextual noise. Another is channel noise. So channel noise is medium related communication barrier. Okay, for example, poor signal affecting picture clarity of television. Okay, that's an example. And then at the same time, guys, uh, we have the context.